Something which we have talked about on the show previously is food insecurity. This is a real issue and an increasing problem in our society, affecting more and more households. Now, perhaps very easy to point the finger and say, hey, the government should do more, or perhaps the social agencies should do more, that it's an economic solution or a social solution. But how big is the problem, and what are some practical things that can be done, a long-term strategy to tackle food insecurity here in New Zealand? Because honestly, given the amount of food that we produce as a nation, it is ridiculous and untenable that people should be not having the food that they need to feed their families. Joining me on the program now, a researcher from the Social Policy and Parliamentary Unit of the Salvation Army, Paul Barber. Paul, kia ora, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, kia ora, Andrew. It's really good to be here.
Firstly, can I just say amazing work that you guys do in this space, and in particular the Ending Food Insecurity report, an intimidating body of research, and I know for you and the team, a lot of work has gone into this. Let's start off by saying, what are you hoping that this report will achieve? Who would you like to read it and respond to it?
Yeah, kia ora, Andrew. I mean, that's the important question. Why did we write a paper like this? And we wrote it because, as we've talked about before, the level of food insecurity and for households with children has reached a stage where it just demands immediate attention. When you've got more than 1 in 4 households with children going regularly without food, something is seriously wrong with our food system in this country. So my colleague Sonia Cameron and I, we sat down and said, how can we map out some solutions that can explain to people in this country that this problem is solvable, and some of the steps we can take. And we've really tried in this report to think about what we can do immediately, what's feasible to be done at community level, like even individuals can be thinking about how they can respond in this space. We've tried to map these solutions so that you can that they can be worked through at a community level, as well as thinking about national strategies and approaches that are needed. So it's our attempt. It's not a huge report. I hope it's not too much for people to work their way through. And we have attempted to summarize in the summary a kind of map of some of the solutions that we think need to be done.
Yeah, and I mean, by intimidating, I meant impressive. It's certainly some great work is done here with the researching, but also with the condensing it down to something which is digestible, appropriately enough. Particularly the work done on looking at the 6 dimensions of food security, saying, hey, look, this is a complex issue, but let's break it down into bite-sized chunks, to continue the metaphor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great metaphor for it. Yeah, the world. There's the international agency called the Food and Agriculture Organization that looks at food security for countries all around the world. So that's all manner of countries. And New Zealand's a developed and wealthy country. We also need to have a food strategy, a food understanding about how we're going to achieve food security. And it talks about food security as their food being available for all people at all times in a way that's affordable, so that nobody needs to go without. And that's a worthy goal that every country should be trying to achieve.
Yep.
And we'll be talking about 6 dimensions of that, because it recognizes there are various aspects to how we achieve it. And talks about agency, access, availability, stability, utilization, and sustainability. Now, all of those things need a bit of explanation, and we don't have time to go into all that now.
Yep.
But what we looked at in writing this was, all right, how do we, if we think about food security through that lens, through the experience, at the Salvation Army, we dive right into the middle of the food insecurity issue. And now there's almost 70 centres around the country that are helping people each day meet their food needs. But we've had a strategy, our Te Kai Makona strategy, that we've developed an organisation to try and promote an abundant food security systems in us. But we're really clear we can't do this on our own.
Yep.
The other community organizations, we work together, but we can't do it on our own. So what can we do together as a country? What can we do together in our communities to make a difference? So, that's why one of the things we call for is a a national food strategy.
Hmm.
Now, okay, that sounds very big and almost intimidating for people, and is often dismissed as, oh, another strategy. What use is that? But one of the questions we asked is, okay, who's in charge in this country of ensuring that communities are food secure?
Yeah.
And we were a bit surprised, really, to realize nobody.
Wow.
There's no agency in this country that is responsible for ensuring we're food secure. The Ministry of Primary Industries spends a lot of time focusing on preparing our agriculture and horticultural sector for being successful
Hmm.
exporters, meeting the food standards internationally. Our food regulators are all focused on those kind of issues, and there's no one with a mandate around food security in this country. It's all about trade and export.
Yeah.
And that means, for instance, in local communities, you'll have local enterprises who struggle, find that they want to do something locally, but they're actually bound by uh, international regulations that don't fit. And we're not saying they shouldn't be regulated.
Mm.
We're just going to say maybe that's one of the things, for instance, that we need to look at.
One of the solutions, and I love the fact that this report is solution based, because a lot of the rhetoric around this is who's to blame? Oh, it's the government's fault, or Salvation Army should do more, or perhaps it's the supermarket's fault and price gouging. But you guys are very much solution focused on this one. One of the suggestions, we do have a grocery commissioner. Perhaps that's the person or the department that should be in charge. Let's make them a food commissioner.
Yeah, that's right. It's one of those issues that, like, who's going to take some responsibility for
Yeah.
advocacy at a government level. We have a children's commissioner, and children are deeply affected by food insecurity. So something like a food commissioner, we do suggest that the grocery commissioner could have their remit expanded. That, I think that's something that needs to be worked through.
Yep.
But the point is, somebody who's independent of government and electoral cycles, who has a very clear mandate to ensure, look at all the parts of our food system and say, how are they working, and how are they working regionally in communities, as well as nationally. I think the grocery commissioner, it's great that they're tackling on all the complexities and challenges of the markets
Yeah.
for grocery goods. But our food systems are about a lot more than simply the grocery markets. So that's what we'd be looking for a food commissioner to do.
One of the things which does stick out, and you're talking about the international comparisons beforehand, that we put ourselves in the same basket in some ways as parts of the world which traditionally have had food insecurity issues. But we're not a nation in famine. We're not a nation which has got droughts and plagues of locusts. We are a nation which produces enough food for many times the population of our country. The amount of food isn't the problem. It's the distribution, the prices, that's the issue, right?
Absolutely. That we can solve this with a few tweaks about our systems. It's not sure, if you think about the debate that there has been around the price of butter,
Yeah.
and the response of Fonterra around that, you've got to realize, if you think in terms of the export focus of our our dairy products,
Yeah.
95% of what we produce is exported. If we were to adjust the price for those dairy things within New Zealand, we're actually only asking for 5% of that production to be sold at a price that may be lower or different, or to be partially subsidized. Again, it'd be good to have a debate about how we would actually ensure more affordable dairy commodities in this country. But the point is, it's a small adjustment. It's if you think of 250,000 children, we export enough for 40 million. That's a very simplistic
Yeah.
set of numbers that can be unpacked. But that means that a fraction of a percent of that needs to be. We need just to ensure that a fraction of a percent of that gets to the people who really need it in this country, and we will not be compromising what we're doing internationally in doing that.
One of the issues on this, though, is the price of food. That we are in a situation of inflation. We're in a financial crisis at the moment. There are people that are struggling to find work because of high unemployment. So even if there's lots of food available, people can't afford to buy that food because we seem to be stuck in this low-wage economy. Is that part of the solution in your view, Paul?
Very much so. In our immediate responses, I think there is a definite need that we address low incomes. the level of assistance for people who are not in paid work, as well as the level of wages that people are paid in work, to ensure that people can actually earn enough to live with dignity. And you've got to remember that hundreds of thousands of people in this country are not in paid work, and many of those people will be in that situation because they're unwell, they're caring for children or other people needing support, or they're not well themselves.
Yeah.
If that means that's an automatic pathway almost into food insecurity because the level of support we provide is not sufficient for people who are not in paid work. So those things need to be addressed, and we can do that tomorrow through adjusting, for instance, even hardship support, which access has been tightened to that recently, just at a time when people are needing it more.
Yeah.
So those things definitely are part of that response and need to be addressed. But alongside that is addressing the fact that in our communities, we've got really creative people at work doing cooperatives, food cooperatives, running smaller enterprises. They're not going to be the national level challenges of the grocery sector, but they're going to provide a really useful service. We've got to recognize some communities simply don't have access to decent food outlets,
Yeah.
and they're often left with a choice of which fast food outlet do I go to because nothing else is within a reasonable distance. So there are multiple challenges, and our report is let's work on those together and let's see how we can do. One of the interesting things I haven't just throwing in that space is the role of our local councils.
Yeah.
One of the things we talk about is how can our local councils help regulate access to food? So there's a couple of things in that. There's specifically, whether they could pass bylaws to restrict fast food and to encourage healthy food outlets. There's also in there in councils how they do their planning and thinking about the infrastructure of their communities. Is food security part of that planning? Those are questions we can ask in our local level councils as well. Might be a good question to throw to your council candidates as we are going through the local body elections at the moment.
Yeah, and hey, as we're doing urban planning, yes, some space for children to play, etc., but perhaps also space for community gardens, community orchards. This type of thing could be something which is initiated either through the local city council or through church groups or other groups in the community. As you say, it's not just a government or a supermarket caused problem. The solutions aren't all with them. It's everybody working together to make this work. Just wanting to come back to a point that you made. It's not just food insecurity. It's having access to healthy food. It's people getting the nutritional balance that they need to live and thrive in a healthy way. This is a huge part of the problem, but again, we've got some short and long-term thinking here. If people have access to healthier food, then we're perhaps saving money in the health sector because of poor health outcomes for people that don't have access to healthy food. It's a redistribution of budget rather than necessarily new money here.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the sort of arguments we're developing in this paper, and it's still very much in its initial framing, is that whole sense thinking in a social investment way, thinking, okay, what we do now has long-term consequences. What we eat affects our long-term health. And we use the example, for instance, of the impact of diabetes in our communities. That's estimated to have a sort of a cost burden on a health burden on us. Our country of about 2.1 billion per year.
Wow.
Now, if you can improve the nutrition of people, particularly our children early on in life, you greatly reduce their risk of them developing disease conditions such as diabetes later in life. It's for a large part, a condition like diabetes is entirely preventable. So it's about, and when we looked at the prices of healthy food compared to unhealthy food, one of the striking things that's happened in recent years, and we're talking about the last 5 years, is that the prices for healthy nutritional food have risen much faster than the prices of not so nutritional food. So, we're caught in a little bit of a trap there, and we need to be addressing what we can do about that. For instance, we dare to take the risk to think about, can we talk about how we approach GST on healthy food, for instance? And while that's been a debate that has kind of yeah, that's a debate that we need to continue.
Yep.
We think there might be ways to design it to target, for instance, support for people. So, as I say, lots of interest in how we can encourage an affordable, healthy diet for people.
Yeah. Hey, there's lots of stuff. There's lots of things to chew over in this report, Paul. and as you say, targeted at decision makers in government, at local council, for social agencies such as yourself, or perhaps small church groups and local communities who are doing what they can with what they've got to meet local needs. But a strategic, collective approach on this one, both immediate, because the need is immediate, but also a long-term strategy. Thank you so much for all of the mahi that you do in the space, Paul. If people wanted to connect to this report, if they wanted to find out more on this, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, it's up on our salvationarmy.org.nz website. We have our email contact at the SPPU is on the report itself.
Yep.
So we welcome any feedback and comments. And ideas for solutions. We're really wanting this to be a discussion, a debate, and with a sense of urgency that we can make a difference tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. So we encourage people to have a read, give us your thoughts, and help us be part of the solution.
Super good stuff. Of course, salvationarmy.org.nz. Kia ora, Paul. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.